This conference will now be recorded.
Good morning, everyone. In the last session, we discussed about the jump statements here. Today, we are going to discuss about the introduction to the classes. So this is from the today onwards, we are going to discuss about the classes related information, and this is the one of the important section we are going to discuss here. But if we observe, whenever from the beginning onwards, we are trying to create the classes here. If you see, so we have come up with a public class written. Right. So now, today we are going to discuss about the purpose of this particular written and what exactly it will do and what are all the different information we are going to understand from this particular class here. Okay. So basically, the whatever the class we are discussing here, the class is a core of our Java language. So without this particular class, we are not going to write any line of code here. Getting the point? This is important. If you want to write anything, so we are going to start from the class here. Without the class, we are not going to write single line of statement in Java language here. Okay. So basically, whatever the class we are defining here, so it's internally, it's going to logically, it will construct the object information here. So the object information is nothing but it will construct the shape and the nature of the our object here. So shape and nature of this particular object is going to constructed by the particular class here. So this is very important, we need to understand. And along with this, so whatever the concept, like any concept, if we are trying to implement from the Java, so we are going to come up with a within the class, we are going to write the code here. Getting the point? So within the code, we are going to define this particular within the class. We are going to write the class related informations here. So getting the point. This is very important. We need to understand here. Whatever we are going to implement whatever we are going to implement, the section of code we are going to write within this particular class here. So now you can think here how much this particular class is important here. Okay. And now we'll try to learn about the some methods, constructor, and keywords here. So this keyword something we'll try to come up with the one by one. First we'll understand the class related information. Later we'll move on to the methods, constructor, and this keyword here. Okay. So as I explained here, from the beginning of this particular Java language session, we are trying to work with our class here. Okay. So now observe what exactly we are doing here. Like what is the syntax we are going to follow here. Getting the point. So to understand this particular class creation, what is the syntax we are going to follow? This is the particular syntax we are going to follow. So as I earlier explained, this is the class and the name of the class name. Getting the point. Name of the this particular class name we are going to provide. And after providing this particular class name, now we'll provide the data type here. We'll provide the data type and we are going to write the instance variable here. Getting the point. Instance variable, this is we'll call it as a. This is important. Instance variable 1, or you can come up with instance variable 2, instance variable 3. The type is same. So whatever the data type you are interested, like we can come up with the integer, or you can come up with the long float, double char, boolean, something. Whatever the data type we are going to use, so we can define the data type here. And after this, we are trying to come up with the instance variable. And after defining this particular instance variable, now what I'm doing here, we are going to come up with a method here. So now if you observe, the data type again I'm providing here. Getting the point. I'm providing the data type and I'm trying to work with the method name one. Method name one. Okay. Same way we can come up with the method name two and method name three. So this is the body of this particular method here. So we'll see what exactly the method will do and what exactly the instance variable will do here. Okay. So right now we don't have much idea about this particular instance variable as well as the method related information. So only we identified the class creation, how we are going to create this particular class based on this particular class keyword. We are going to define the name of the class here. Okay. So this is we identified here. So basically when we are trying to create this particular class, whenever we are trying to define this particular class here, we are going to come up with a new data type here. So right now, so we are aware of it, the particular integer related, floating related, boolean related, as well as the character related data types. But here, whenever we are trying to come up with this particular class, we are going to come up with a new data type here. This is important here. And the particular data type, how we are going to access it with help of the object creation. So once object is created, we are going to access the appropriate, the newly created data type here. Okay, so this is important here. So any class we are defining, the class will contain the new data type. New data type is nothing but some of the method will come up with a different data type, and some of the constructors and some of the instance variable we are going to have different data type. All we are going to come up with one class. So class is internally one more data type. It is a custom data type here. Like based on the class, we can imagine the class will contain the different purposes here. So the class will do the different purposes here. Okay. So this is we need to understand here. And here the class it will give you the template information. Getting the point? The class will provide the template. Template is nothing but so what are the information we need? Those information we are going to write inside this particular class. So this is we can call it as a template. And how we are going to access this information? Once we create an object here. Once we create an object based on the instance variable, we are going to access this particular template informations here. Okay, so this is very important. We need to understand here. The two things first, whenever we are creating the class, so it is internally provide the new data type and whatever the properties we are going to write inside the class that we'll call it as a template. The template we are going to access once the object is created here. Okay, we'll see the object how it is going to create here. But now whenever we are trying to define the class here, so we are going to define the nature of the class here. So nature of the class is nothing but how exactly the class is going to do. We are going to define the information while creating this particular class here. So now observe, we come up with a variable and we come up with a method. So in future we'll come up with the constructors and we are going to add a lot of information here. Okay, so initially just we'll understand the this particular section here. Okay, now if you see whatever we are defining here, and this instance variable, why we are calling this particular instance variable? Because this variable we are creating at the class level. So here, if you see the line number 6, we created the variable, the boolean data type. It is a data type called boolean. The name of the variable we are having as a t, and what is the value we initialized here? That is called false here. Getting the point? This is the value, and this is the variable name, and this is the data type here. So don't confuse here. This is very important here. Okay, what is the value we are initializing? That is called false we are initializing. And this particular variable where we define here, the variable we define under this particular main method. The variable we define under this particular main method here. Okay, but what we can understand here, whatever the variable we are defining instance variable, so we are going to write here at the class level. At the class level, we are going to write the method, not the method level, because as I explained, this method will available in the different memory location, and this particular class will available. It is in the different memory locations here. Okay, this particular variable will call it as a instance variable here. This is very important here. And collectively, so we are going to come up with the methods and variable. We are going to write within the class here, and the methods and variable we are going to access once the object is created or based on the class references here. Based on the class reference we are going to access the simple information here. Okay, so let's have a simple example how we can come up with this particular class related example. So now what I will do, so whatever we created earlier, again I'm going to use the same, and here I'm come up with the one class. So carefully observe what is the class I'm trying to create. So box I'm creating. Right now I'm not going to use any main method here. Now just I'm clicking the finish here. Now observe public class box here. So the box class we created. Right. So once a box class is we created, now what we are doing here, we are trying to define the instance variable. What is the type we are suggesting here? Double. This is the double data type we are having here. And name of the variable what I'm trying to provide, something like this is the variable name. Getting the point? So now if you see the highlighted also the color is different here. Width color is different, and earlier whatever the variable we identified, this particular color is different. Okay. So by seeing the also we can easily understand, but think about this. This will call it as a instance variable. So this variable, if we want to access here, what we need to come up with this particular box class object here. From the box class object itself, we are going to access this particular width variable. Okay, and one more variable I want to provide. So that is called height here. And now what I'm doing here, depth I'm trying to define. Getting the point? Depth I'm trying to define. So how many instance variable we define? So we define three instance variable here. Okay, once we define this particular three instance variable, what we are trying to do here, what exactly we are going to do here. So we need to understand here. Now, if you see, after creating this particular instance variable, now we are going to create an object here. So where we are going to create this particular object. Okay, right now I'm not going to create object anything inside this particular box class. Now what I will do, I am going to create a one more class here. One more class I'm going to create here, box demo. So once I created this particular box demo, I'm trying to come up with a main method. Now you can see from this particular main method, now what I'm doing is I'm trying to create an object here. So this is very important here. How this particular objects I'm trying to create. So what is the type we are having here? So as I explained here, whenever we are trying to create, it will have a new data type that is called box here. This is the new data type I'm trying to create, and it is a reference variable I'm using, and new box here. Getting the point? So this particular line, what is doing internally, it is create a box object here. Getting the point? So create the box object here, and where this particular object is going to store inside this particular box reference. Getting the point? So B capital that that we are going to call it as a reference, sorry, data type here, and this particular box we are going to call it as a reference here. So carefully observe, this is the data type here. Okay, this is we are going to call it as a data type, and this is we are going to call it as a reference variable here. So why we are calling this particular reference variable? Because this reference variable will contain the particular object information. What is object information? It will contain whatever the box we are creating it, the box information will contain under this particular reference variable here. And what about this particular new? This is the keyword. Basically, this particular keyword, it's going to create the object of this particular box here. It's going to create object of this particular box. And what is this we are going to call here? This is, we'll call it as a default constructor. Getting the point? Default constructor. This is very important here. Why we are calling this particular default constructor? Because default constructor will initialize the default values of the particular data type variable. Whatever the variable we are using, the variable will initialize it with the default values here. Getting the point? How many variables we declare here? Three variables we declare here. The three variables are going to initialize it with the default values. The three variables are going to initialize with the default values. So this is very important here. Okay, so don't confuse here. The first one we are going to call it as a data type. Second one we are calling as a reference variable. The reference variable is going to access to the this particular heap memory here. So it's contain the sorry, not RV, it's contain this particular box here, and this particular box will contain here width, height, and depth here. Getting the point? These are all the three variables are available, and this going to access by this particular box, and the same box we are using. Okay, this is, we'll call it as a heap memory. Okay, so we'll understand here the differences between the heap memory as well as stack memory in our upcoming classes. One day we'll have a simple example so that we'll get to know how this particular memories are will look like. But just for understanding the current example, imagine this variable contain this information, and this new keyword is going to create an object under this particular heap memory. What object is going to create? Whatever the object we are trying to create. So the box object here. Getting the point. The box object is going to create under this particular heap memory, and while creating this particular object internally, it is calling the default constructor to initialize the default values. To initialize the particular default values here. Okay, so this is very important. We need to understand it. Now, what I'm doing here after this. So after this, so we are going to initialize the values because if I'm trying to print this, so if we observe box dot width, okay, box dot width I'm trying to print. So now what is the value we are getting here? In the console, you can see in the below, we are getting 0.0. Why? How we are getting this particular 0.0? So if we go to this particular box, we are not initializing any value. So just we are declaring the variable here. So initialization is different, declaration is different. So I explained in the previous example from the starting onwards we are discussing here declarations and initializations here. So this section we'll call it as a declarations here. And who is going to initialize this particular value? The values are going to initialize it by the this particular constructor. Now you can see what is the value we are getting 0.0. But I don't want to get this particular 0.0. Okay. So now what exactly we'll do here? Okay, now, so someone having some question, can you please, you can ask your questions, what you're having.
Yeah, hi. So we can create the object for the instance variables in the same class, like right? So why are we using the different class for creating the object?
See, this particular section you can copy and you can paste it in the box class.
Yeah,
That we can do. So basically what I'm doing, I don't want to disturb this particular class. So again, you'll get some confusion. Instead of doing this, I come up with the one more class here. So there is no problem here, just to copy the entire, the main method section part under this particular box class you can create.
and the scope for the public is entire package.
No, so public is not going to it's not going to work with any package here. So without the package also you can access here. The package is basically, so if you want to access within the package, you can remove this public. The default one will work in the same package.
So what
So
is
we'll
the
discuss
scope for
the,
the public, sir?
see, basically public is nothing but we are giving a public access. Like here we don't have any restrictions here. From any location we can access this particular box demo.
From the different package also?
Yes,
Okay, got it. So it should be in the same. We can use the entire project, right?
yes.
Okay, got it.
Not only
Thank
the project, we can use the from the jars and different libraries also.
you. Okay, got it. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so now observe carefully. Now what we are doing here, basically here we are trying to access this particular box dot width. But what is the box here? Box is the reference variable of this particular box object here. And why we are using this particular reference variable? Because this object is created under this particular heap memory, and this is the location references here. So for example, I'm going to print this particular box here. Now what you understand here? This is the location here. Getting the point. So how it is creating this? So if you want to understand this particular section, so let me go to this particular object here. Now I'm opening toString here. Now you can see. So here you can see we are having at the rate here. And now you can observe here, same at the rate we are able to print here. And before the at the rate, what we are having here, get class dot get name. Getting the point. Get class dot get name we are having. So this is the get name we are printing here. Okay, and is appending with this particular at the rate, and again it is appending with this particular hash code here. So what we can understand here, this is the hash code of whatever the object we created. Getting the point. So we'll understand this particular equals and hash code in our upcoming classes. Basically, to this particular object, if we want to create uniquely, we can override this particular hash code method, and we can come up with the specific implementation so that it will try to create the object with a unique information. If you see right now, this method is not yet implemented here, and this section I will discuss more in our upcoming classes whenever we are discussing the collection framework, because there it is useful, more understandable the how this particular hash code and equals method will do. But the current example, what we need to understand, whenever I'm trying to call this particular box reference here, what happening internally, it will call this particular toString method. It will call this particular toString method and it will return this particular information here. Okay, so for example, now here what I'm trying to understand here, let me generate, where is that? So generate toString method, and I'm trying to generate here. Now if you see, again I'm going to run the same example. Now observe carefully. So why at this time we are getting this message? Getting the point. Earlier we did not get this particular message, but currently we are getting this particular message here. Okay. So why we are getting? If you go to this particular box class, now observe carefully how we are the toString we are constructing. So basically this is the toString is generated by the ID. So whatever, if you're not interested this particular format, now you can come up with a different format. Okay, so just for understanding I'm explaining here. So this is the box we are providing here, and is appending with the width, height, and depth. Whatever the values we are going to have, the values are going to appended it. Getting the point. So initial values it's printing because we did not initialize any explicit values. These are all the default values it's printing. But what I want to provide the information here, whenever we are trying to call the references here, whenever we are trying to call this particular references internally, it will call the toString method. Internally, it will call the toString method to print the whatever the way the object we are trying to print here. The default object way here, this one. If you are not overriding this particular toString method, this is the default behavior to print the object information. So once you override here, this is the way the object is going to print here. Okay, so this is very important here, the toString method. Most of the time here, whenever you're trying to use the reference here, so after this particular reference, something you are going to use height here. So at this time, it is not going to print the toString related information. So it's going to look only the height related information. So right now, the height related information, we are having 0.0. So basically, how it is going to look like. Now we can imagine here, this is the heap memory we are having, and this is the width, height, and depth. What is the default values we are having right now? 0.0. Getting the point. All the values are we are having 0.0, and this is the reference is contained by this particular box here. So when this particular object is going to create, whenever we are using this particular new keyword here. Okay, using this box dot, this is we can call it as a width, this is we can call it as a height, this is we can call it as a depth. Box dot width, box dot width, it will point you to this. Box dot height, it will point you to this, and box dot depth. Getting the point. If I'm not using this particular box, what happens internally? Compiler will give an error. So if you understand here, so here one more sysout I want to print, and here now you can see I want to use the depth. So compiler cannot understand here from where this particular depth is coming. So now you can see cannot resolve the variable, cannot resolve this particular variable. This is important here. So whenever we are creating an object here, this is the way we are going to create an object. It's contain the reference variable. From the reference variable, we are accessing the height. So if you see this height where we are defining, here we are defining this particular height here. Okay, now we'll initialize the value. So how we can initialize the value? To initialize this particular value, now what we can do? Again, we need to use the reference variable dot. We need to come up with this particular variable, and we need to use this particular depth here and provide the values. So whatever the value we are providing. Now if you see what we are doing is, so depth we are providing the 100. Now I'm not going to print this particular height. So I'm going to print this particular box. Now you can see, so depth we are getting as a 100. The depth we are getting 100, the remaining we did not initialize this particular two values, still they are getting as a default values here. Okay, so this is the way we can initialize the values here. So just to be declared in the previous section, now we are initializing this particular values here. Now, and what we need to understand here, this particular dot here, what exactly the dot is doing here, this particular dot operator, it's going to link the name of the object with the name of the instance variable here. This is very important, we need to understand here. So it's going to provide the relation between the it's going to provide the relation between the name of the object as well as name of this particular instance variable. So what is the object we are having? Box. And what is the instance variable we are having? That is called depth here. Getting the point? How we are going to make the relation between these two using this particular dot operator here. Okay, this is very important, we need to understand here. And now, so we'll come up with the different values here. So we initialize the one depth value, and now what I'm going to do, I'm going to initialize with this we can call it as a 10. And okay, the three values we are initializing. So once we initialize this particular three value, now what I'm doing here, I'm going to find out the volume of this particular box. So whatever the box we are creating here, I want to find out this particular volume of this particular box. So we are having depth, we are having height, we are having, and we are width also we are having. Okay, now what we will do, we'll find out this particular value. So to find out this particular value, now what we can do, so once we modify, like once we multiply this particular all the values, so we may get the volume of this particular box here. Okay, now observe carefully again how I'm trying to print. So box dot depth multiply box dot height, and the same way box dot width here. Getting the point? So whenever we are trying to multiply this section, now what happens internally? It will give you the it will give you the volume of this particular box here. Again, what is the result we are going to get here? This is important here, because here these three we are having double data type here. So what is the result we are going to get? Like the result having which data type here? Either it is a int or long double float. So which the data type we are going to have for this particular result? Again, it is going to have double itself only, because so it is a bigger data type here. Now if you see what we are doing here, we are trying to initializing the result of this particular multiplication values. So into the which variable we are trying to result, well, like we are trying to store here, that is called VOL. So VOL is nothing but volume of this particular box here. Okay, now if I'm going to print this particular volume, so what is the value we are getting? It's like a 3000 here. So this is the volume of this particular box here. Okay, simple understanding, but only what we need to focus here, this is we need to focus more onto this. So depth, height, and width, how we are initializing the value and how we are trying to multiply this particular values to get the result of like a volume of this particular box here. Okay, so any questions regarding this particular simple example?
No.
Okay, so basically whenever we are trying to create this particular object internally, so the compiler will create a two dot class files here, one for this particular box demo and one for this particular box here, because inside this particular box demo, now what we are doing is we are trying to create this particular box related information here. Okay, so this is very important here. So instead of doing this, so what we can do exactly, so we can cut this information and can paste it here. Now you can run the same example. Now you can run the same example. So we are able to see the same response here. But what we need to understand here, so instead of writing all the code in the same class, So what we did here earlier, we come up with the one more class and we define the main method. So this is also one way to define all the information, because in the same class we can easily understand how this particular the variables and the methods, whatever we are going to create a method, how it is calling and how it is initializing here. Okay, observe here, but most probably this section we don't want to forget it. This is, we'll call it as a instance variable. Okay, and if you write anything here under this particular main, so for example, int I is equals to something like 10. So this is, we are not going to call it as a instance variable. This is not the instance variable here. This is, we'll call it as a the local variable to this particular main method. So if you try to access this box.i, now you can see the box.i, it's not available here. So I'm trying to initializing the 25. Now you can see the line number, the whatever the 15 we are initializing it, we are getting an error. Why? The I is the local to this particular main method, not to this particular box class here. Getting the point? This is, we need to understand very carefully here. So if you want to initialize this directly, you can remove the reference this and you can provide the whatever the value you want to initialize here, because it is the local to this particular main method here. Okay, so now what we will do, I'm going to come up with one more object here. I'm going to come up with this particular one more object. So right now we created box here, and one more box I'm going to create. So this section we'll call it as a box 2, or we can call it as a box 1 this. Box 1 and okay. So this is, we'll call it as a box 1. And now what I will do, so I'm going to come up with one more box here. So how we can create this particular one more box here. So after this particular value, I'm going to box 2 dot height is equals to something like 6 I'm initializing. Box 2 dot depth is equals to 9. Okay, and finally I'm going to call the same volume here, and we'll print this. So we cannot use the same variable. Now I'm trying to come up with a volume one. Now what I will do, for example, I'm going to comment out this. I'm trying to I'm going to comment out this particular two string here, and instead of printing this particular volume we can print, and box 2 also I'm going to print box 2, as well as here after this particular volume I'm going to print box 1 here. Okay, so see the differences between these two example, how it is going to work. So now observe carefully. So this is the 3000 for the box 1 volume we are getting, and this is the box 1 reference. Okay, sorry, this I missed here. Okay, yeah, I forget to modify this too. Okay, let me run one more time, because I did not modify the references here. Okay, observe carefully. So volume of this particular box 1, 3000 we are getting, and this is the object reference. Getting the point? This is the particular object, and is having the hash code of this particular value. And now you can see this is the volume of this particular box 2. Now if you see, the hash code is different. Why the hash code is different? Because all the fields are same. We come up with the same width, height and depth only. So here also we are defining the same width, height and depth only. But why the value, the whatever the value we are appending here, it is a different one. You can see after the at the rate, we are getting the different values here. Why we are getting this particular different here?
Because it's stored in a different heap memory.
Yeah, heap memory is same, but the location is different.
Yeah, sorry.
So we are having the same heap memory, the objects are uniquely it's created. So now what I want to share the information. So this, even though we are trying to create the same object type here, what is the data type here? Box type. We are trying to create the same type of object here, but only the difference here, how many objects we are going to create it. Each and every object is the uniquely created here. So those are not the common object here. So this is I want to provide here. How many objects we are going to create? All the objects are having different information here. So for example, if you provide the values here, same values. So here, if I'm trying to give the 10 and the 20, and here I'm trying to initialize with the 15. So even though I'm trying to provide same values, but now you can see the object creation is different here. The location is different. So this object we may, so imagine this is the some heap memory. It will store the object 1 here. Maybe it will store the object 2 here. Okay. So it is the different location here. This is for the box 1 and this is for the box 2 here. Getting the point? So because of that, we are getting a hash code is different for the box 2, and same way the hash code is different for this particular box 1 here. So by seeing this, we can, what we can understand here, these are all the unique object, like it is not the common object, it is the specific object which contain the specific information here. So this is I want to share one more information here. Okay. So any questions? This particular two objects here.
No.
Okay, now what we need to understand here, declarations as well as initialization. But what we are doing here, we are trying to creating the single line here. So basically what we can do, so just I'm providing the declaration section here. Now this we are going to call it as a declarations here. And here the line number 11, what we are doing here, we are trying to initializing here. The line number 11 we are calling as a initialization. But what is the differences here? Sometimes what happen here, this particular declarations we are going to use in the different location for this particular common reusable. So we want to reuse the same object, like we want to access the same object in the multiple locations. Now what we can do, we can come up with a declaration, and in the specific location we can create the object here. It's like we can initialize the object here, and so once object is initialized here, the location is same. Once object is initialized here, the location is same, the location is not going to modify here. But only the thing here, based on this particular location, we are going to update the properties. We are going to update the properties, or we are going to call the methods. That is the way we are going to do, but this particular location is not going to change here. Getting the point? So once this particular object is created, it's not going to change here. When it is going to change, if the object is no longer used, so then only the object is going to delete it from the heap memory. At the time of deletion, this particular reference, whatever the location we are having, this location is not going to available here. Okay. And now what we need to understand here, so whenever we are trying to declaring this, so we cannot access this information. For example, okay, let me comment out. So you can see what happening here, the box one, the local variable box one may not be initialized here. Getting the point. Now what you are understanding here, so whenever we are trying to declare this particular box information, we cannot access this particular properties which are available on the same box class here. So when we can access here, once this particular object is initialized here. Getting the point. So once the object is created, then only we are able to access the information which are available inside this particular class. Otherwise, so you can see how many errors we are getting. So these many errors we are going to get here. Okay. So once the object is initialized here, we are able to access the height, width, and something like a depth here. Okay. This is important here, declaring an object here and initializing an object here. And one more, I want to provide the information. So instead of doing this particular box 2, instead of creating this particular box 2, now what I will do, here I'm going to assign the box 1. Here I'm going to assign this particular box 1 here. Now observe carefully what happens internally. Let me save this particular class here. So if I'm going to run this example, now observe. So you can see both are having same reference. Getting the point? Now you can read this hash code here. Both objects, even box 1 and box 2 having same. Why we are having same here? Here we are not creating the box 2 object here. Whatever the box 1 object we created, just we are copying into this particular box 2 here. Getting the point? This is very important. We need to understand here. So we are trying to whenever we are trying to cloning this, so this is the one more section we are going to call the line number 12. This is we are cloning. So from the which object into which object here, whatever the box 1 object we are having, we are trying to cloning into this particular box 2. It's nothing but we are copying the all the features which are available in the box 1 into this particular box 2 here. So at the time of cloning here, this is important here. So what we can understand is, imagine heap memory, and this is an object we are having here. Getting the point? So this particular object width, height, and depth we are having. And what is the references we are having here? So these references will contain two here. Box 1, box 2. These two are accessing the same object. Right? These two are accessing the same object references. This is important here. Okay, if you modify something from the box 1, it is affected into this particular box 2, or if you modify something from the box 2, it is affected into this particular object, the box 1 object here. Because both objects, box 1 and box 2, are accessing the same object location here. So you can see both are having same hash code here. Is nothing but both the objects are pointing the same object location inside this particular heap memory here. Getting the point? This is important here. Basically, whenever we are trying to clone an object here, so if we modify something, let's have a simple example on this. So what I am doing here, I will modify this 3, 6, and 9 here. Okay, now here only two section I am going to print here. Section 1, box 1 dot width. So basically, box 1 dot width, what is the value we are going to get earlier? Basically, we should return this box 1 dot width, we need to return as a 15. Okay, this is the 15 value we are expecting here. Now we'll see what is the value we are going to get here. And another one, box 2, box 2 dot width. Getting the point? Box 2 dot width. What is the value we are expecting here? 3. So the box 1 we are expecting as a 15, and box 2 we are expecting as a 3. Okay, let's run the same example. Let's run the same example. Now you can see the last two information. So why we are getting 3 and 3? Why I'm not getting this particular 15? Getting the point? This is important. Earlier we come up with a 15 here. So if we want to print this after this particular volume, okay, after object reference here. So observe carefully the line number 20. Now what I'm doing here, I'm trying to print the box 1 dot width. Again, I'm trying to print the same one, line number 27. So see the differences here, how it is going to print. So you can see after this particular box reference is printed, what is the value we are printing here? 15. The value is printing 15. It's correct. Because here we initialize the value as a 15 and we are printing the line number 20. The 15 is expected. But after the line number 26, again we are trying to print this 27, but here we are getting as a 3. Here why we are getting as a 3? Getting the point? Because of here what we are doing here, we are trying to cloning the whatever the object 1 we are having, we are cloning into this particular object 2. Whenever we are cloning here, it's containing the same object references here. If you modify something, it will affect it into the both locations here. Okay, now you can see. So this is the simple example we identified, because the width in the two locations, the width values we are having as the same. Getting the point? So you can practice with the different properties, like you can take as a height and the depth. You can check with the different object creations and you can modify the values. So you can check how the remaining values are affecting here. Okay, so any questions on this particular object cloning?
Sir, I got a little late today, so I want to know why we are like using this line number 9 and line number 17.
No, just I'm declaring. This is basically local variable I declare. I am not using anywhere here. So just I
Okay.
provided the differences here. This is the instance variable, and these are all the local to this particular main methods. So I did not
Okay.
use any location here.
Okay. Got it.
So now we'll move on to the method creations here. So how exactly we can come up with the method creation? So basically, if I want to come up with a method creation, first what we need here. So what I will do, I will copy this entire section. Again, I will go to this particular box demo. Okay. So here what I'm doing here. Here I'm trying to come up with one more object here that so one more class that is called box demo, and inside this particular box class I'm trying to make this particular properties as a the variables I'm making as a private. Okay, so let me save this. Now if you observe here, whenever I'm making these variables as a private, now what happens internally, we are getting these many errors here. Getting the point? So why we are getting these many errors? The private access modifier is applicable within the same class. Within the same class. So for example, I'm going to copy this. I'm not going to cut this. I'm going to copy and I will paste it here. So now observe any error we are getting here. We're not getting any error. So if I'm going to run this example, happily it will run. Whatever the okay, proceed that. So whatever the values we get it earlier, the same values we are getting here. But the problem, why we are getting here these many errors here? Getting the point. So what I want to provide here, the private access modifier is applicable within the same class. Getting the point. It is applicable within the same class, but we are outside of this particular class here called box here. So whenever we are trying to access the outside of this particular class here, so now what is the best way to access here?
We
Getting
have
the
to
point. What is
store.
the best way to? So we are going to come up with the methods here. So using this particular method only, we are going to access here. Okay. So right now, this section we are going to call as a one of the OOPS principle here. So right now, don't worry. So once the basic example we completed, we'll move on to the OOPS principle here, how exactly it's going to work here. Okay. So like polymorphism, abstraction, encapsulation, inheritance, how it is going to work. So everything we are going to understand. But just for understanding here, the current example, so to like handle this particular errors here, now what I'm doing here, I'm going to create a methods here. So what are all the methods I'm going to create here? The method, it will take the properties and it will initialize the values here. So what is the values are it's going to initialize here? Whatever the variable we are having here, the variables are going to initialize here. Getting the point? And and a method, basically if you create this particular method here, so the Java it's going to give the flexibility, and we can call it as a the power of this particular methods here. Because most of the example or most of the applications, we are not going to give the option to the variables here. The variables every time we are going to make as a private. If we want to access the variable, we are going to access through this particular method, because this is one of the our the object oriented oops principles here. Okay, that we need to follow here. So how we can follow here? To access this particular variable, what is the best way to access? We are going to come up with variables as a private, and we are going to access with methods here. Okay, the method I'm going to create here. To create this particular method, now what I'm doing here, to create this particular method, what is the syntax we need to follow? First we need to follow the type. What is the data type this particular method contains here? And the name of the method, and if it is having any parameters, we are going to come up with a parameter list here. Okay, so observe, now I'm trying to come up with this particular value. So I'm going to come up with a value here. So now how we can write this particular value method, and observe carefully. So this is the void. This method is not going to return anything, that we already identified in the earliest example, and the name of the method, value method. Now what I'm doing here, so just I'm going to print the statements. Okay, this statement will contain here. So volume is, and now what we can do here? So width, height, and depth method. Now observe here. So the value method, what is doing internally? It is trying to multiply this particular width, height, and depth here. Okay, and it will try to print the whatever the result we are going to get. Now how we are going to access this particular value? So right now I'm trying to removing this whatever the private we are having here. So I'm removing this. I will provide one more time this particular private. So before going to come up with the setter method, so first I will call this particular value method. And how we can call this particular value method? Now observe, instead of calling this, getting the point, instead of calling the whatever the multiplication here, what we are doing here, inside this particular box class we come up with the one value method, and it's internally it is doing the same multiplication here. Internally it is doing the same multiplication, and here we don't have any the object references here because we are in the same class. We are in the same class here. Directly we can access this particular variable information here. Getting the point? So observe here. Now what I will do, I am going to remove this particular section here, here and here. Now what I will do here, I am going to call the method. So how I am calling here, box1 dot volume. Getting the point? Box1 dot volume. Now what is the box1 here? Box1 is a reference of this particular box object. The box object is containing this particular volume. Getting the point. So how this particular compiler is going to check? This is important here. First is going to check the reference variable. The reference variable having the what data type here. This is important here. Whatever I'm trying to highlighting here, this is important. It is having the box data type. Whenever it is having the box data type here, the compiler, it will go to this particular box and it will check this whether this particular method is available or not. Whatever the method we are calling here, whether the method is available or not. If it is not available, the compiler will give an error here. Right now we are having the same method. Okay, so remove this particular print statement, because so inside the value method we are printing here. And finally, so these two also we can eliminate. Box2 dot value method. Getting the point? Box2 dot value method. This is the calling of this particular method. So now understand here how this particular main method is going to call. So as I explained earlier, the main method is going to call from the JVM. Now if we observe carefully, if we want to call this particular main method, what is the steps we can do? So this is a step. So here how we are creating this particular object. Box object we are creating. But if I want to call the main method, what is an object we need to create here? That is called box demo. Getting the point? So box demo something BD, and we can come up with a new box demo we can create. And here BD dot what we are doing here, we are going to call the main here. We are going to call the main. This is the calling of this particular main. But this two lines of code where we are going to write inside this particular JVM, right? But now whatever the object we are creating like box class. So explicitly we are creating this particular box class object to call this particular value method here. Getting the point? To call this particular value method. So along with the value method, now what we are doing is we are trying to initializing something. So other than this particular main method, we are not doing here anything here. But in the current example, along with this particular calling the value method, we are initializing the variable values here. Okay, so something other than this particular calling the value method, we are doing some information here. Okay, that is we need to check here. So even though this value method also we can call from the, like without creating this particular object also we can call here, but that is section we'll see in our upcoming classes how we can come up with a without the object creation. But right now understand here what is the method we are creating, the value method, how we are calling it with help of this particular box1 dot value here. Okay, now run this particular example. Observe, volume is 3000 we are getting, and this is the object references like width value we are printing, and one more volume is 162. So from where these particular two printed statements are printing, these two printing from this particular value method. Getting the point? So now what you understand here, what is the purpose of this particular value method? Internally, it is trying to multiplying the all the instance variable, and it is trying to giving the result of this particular box here. Getting the point? So this is very important here. So any questions regarding this particular value method?
No.
Okay. So same way, what I will do, so we'll come up with a setter method now. So now we understand the simple example. Whenever we are trying to create the method, so first we need to create an object of this particular class, and with help of this particular reference variable, we can call the method. Okay. So right now, what I will do, along with this, I'm going to come up with one more method, something like set values. Okay. This is the another method I'm trying to use here. And now observe, I'm trying to use a parameter list. This will call it as a parameter list here. So how we can write this particular parameter list here? Something like, okay, how many parameters we need to pass to this particular method? The set values method, we need to pass three parameters. So how this particular three parameters we are identifying it? The comma. This particular comma is going to differentiate the parameter list here. Getting the point? This is very important here. And what type of the values we can set as a parameter here? The data type we are having as a double here. This is important here. Whenever we are trying to create any method with a parameter list here, first we need to specify the data type here. What kind of data type we are going to provide? The same data type values we can set here. Otherwise, again the compiler will give an error here. Okay. So now, right now, I'm trying to use this particular width is equals to width here. Okay. So now, same way, this dot height is equals to height, and this dot what is another one, depth is equals to depth here. Okay, how many variables we are having? Three variables, and we are trying to set this particular three parameters into this particular three variables here. So later we'll discuss about this particular this keyword here, but right now understand here the local variable. What are all the local variable here? This width, height, and depth. These three variables are local to this particular method. Getting the point? So these three variables are local to this particular method. Now what I'm doing is, whatever the local value we are having, now I'm trying to set into this particular instance variable. Now I'm trying to set into the instance variable. Now what happens here? If I'm not going to set this particular values here, if I'm not going to set these values into the instance variable, by default, whatever the values we are having, those values we are going to get here. Okay, so let's understand here. We'll see without this particular this keyword what happens here. With using this particular this keyword, what is the result we are going to get. Now finally I'm moving into the box demo, and here what I want to understand here, I'm going to comment out these three sections here, because we come up with a method here, box one dot set values method, something like width I'm giving as a 15, and height I'm going to give as a 20, and the depth I'm going to give as a 10 here. Now what we can do, we can comment out this particular section. Okay, so if you use this, so if you come up with this particular each variable as a private, now what happens internally, we may get an errors here. So that just now we identified here, but how we are going to access this particular variable informations, how we are going to access this particular variable information directly with help of this particular method here. Now you can see. Now I want to comment out, because width is a private access here. We cannot access outside of this particular class here. Getting the point? So because of that, it is giving me an error here. So I don't want to use this two sections here. And the same way, now call this. And here, change the references here. Box 2. With help of this particular box 2, I'm calling here something like 3, comma 6, comma 9. So you can imagine how many lines of code it is, how many lines of code is removed here. Getting the point? So instead of accessing the direct variable information, now what we are doing is we come up with the one method. We are calling the method with help of this particular parameter list here. How many parameter we want to pass, we can pass here. Okay. So see, same output we are going to get here. So volume is 3000 here, and the volume is 162. Earlier, whatever the volume we are getting here, same volume we are getting here, but only the difference here. So whenever we come up with this particular variable as a private, what is another way to access the variable information? That is called using this particular method. So methods cannot create the private access here. Getting the point? See, this method, if it is calling internally to any other method, we can make those methods as a private. But the setter related methods or getter related method, we cannot come up with a private here. Getting the point? This is the principles we are having in our Java language. The variable we can make as a private here, but the method we cannot make as a private here. We should make as a public here. Right now, I'm not providing any access modifier. This will come under the default here. So default access modifier will work based on the packages here. So it will work on the same package here. But observe carefully. Now what we are doing here, we are calling the one method, and internally we are setting the values. So whatever the values we set it here, like box1 dot depth and box1 dot height here, the same thing here. But here we don't have an object reference because we are in the same class. Directly we can access this particular variable. If I'm able to access the variable as a directly, why I want to use this particular this? Okay, so observe carefully. I'm trying to remove the this keyword for the only one variable here. So now see what is the volume we are getting. One is a 3000, second one we are getting as a 162. If I'm going to run this example, what is the output we are getting here? What is the volume we are getting here? 0.0. Why we are getting 0.0? Any idea?
During the object creation, it was initialized with 0, right? By default constructor. That value it's taking.
Okay, that the same thing it's happened in the earlier also. The object creation, I did not do anything else. Just I whatever the object we are creating, I'm keeping as it is here. So just I modified only the this keyword, and remaining I did not do any changes here. Okay. So if you observe carefully, as I explained earlier, these three variable width, height, and depth, these are all the local to this particular method. So whenever it is local to this particular method, now what we need to understand, this particular section will available in the stack memory. So if we observe carefully, this stack memory will contain like this the small memory it's having. So once this particular line number 17 is executed, these values are no longer available. Right now, width we are having something like 10, 20, and something like 15 we are having. Getting the point? This particular 10, 20, 15 values, once the line number 17 is executed, it will no longer available here. Again, if these particular values are no longer available, what about these particular values here? What about this particular values here? While creating while creating object of this particular box, what is the values we are providing here? Something like 0.0. Getting the point? Something like 0.0 we are providing here. But if you see observe carefully, compiler compiler is treating these two sections width equals to width. Basically, what we are doing here, whatever the right side value we are having, whatever the right side value we are having, we are trying to set into the left side variable. Okay, but here the compiler is treating as a width equals to width, both the variables as a local variable, not the instance variable with the local variable. So if you see the second one, height here, height, this left side section this is treating as a instance variable, and the right side section is treating as a local variable. And here the line number 13, these two variables compiler is treating as a local variable. Compiler cannot understand, so same variable name having for the instance variable here. Getting the point? Compiler here cannot understanding it. The instance variable is also having the same name here. Only compiler know whatever the variable we provided. So these two are having the same local variable. So what happens here? Once we initialize the value, because the local value again we are trying to store into the local variable. Once the len number 17 is executed, these two sections, height and depth, we are having the height is having something like a 20, and the depth we are having something like a 15. But what about this particular width here? Width still it is having the default value called 0.0 only. Why? Here the line number 13, it is not initializing into the instance variable value. It is trying to initializing into only the local value. The local value is again initializing into the local variable only. So in that case, if we multiply something, if anything we are going to multiply with a 0, the result we are going to get as a 0. Getting the point? So whenever here I want to provide one more information. So whenever the local variable name and instance variable name is having same name, getting the point? So if you see, this is a width, and here also we come up with the width. So the compiler, it's going to get some dilemma like which one is the instance variable and which one is a local variable. So compiler cannot determine here, so cannot understand here which is the instance. So to differentiate the instance variable as well as the local variable, now what I'm doing here, I'm trying to use the keyword call this here. Getting the point? This particular keyword is going to differentiate the which one is the local variable and which one is the instance variable here. So this is the resolution whatever we are getting this particular 0.0. Okay, basically this keyword is going to return the current class object here. What is the current class here? Current class is nothing but this. Current class is nothing but a box. Inside the box, how many variables we are having? 3 variables. Now what I'm doing is this dot width. This is the current class object, and using this particular current class object, I'm trying to reference this particular width. So just now we discussed about this particular dot. What it will do, this particular dot, it's going to provide the relationship between the class and as well as the variable here. It's going to provide the relation between these two. Then only the compiler understand, okay, this is the width is coming from the instance variable and this is the width is coming from the local, because I'm not using any this here. Okay, so this is only the resolution of the particular volume 0 we are getting. Now if you see, we are getting 3162. Okay, so is it clear? Any questions?
No.
Not able to hear. Okay. So, so I'm going to stop here because we cannot continue this particular course. We need to return some value. We need to discuss more on this particular method section. So right now we are having only two information we implemented, like value. Internally, it is not returning anything. Just it is multiplying the value. This is the purpose of this particular value method we identified. So we come up with the one more method is trying to initializing the value. So just is the purpose of this method is initializing the value into the instance variable. So on Monday, what we will do, we'll discuss about the returning the value from this particular method. And the same way, after returning this, so if the method is going to take multiple parameters. So why we need to pass this particular parameter? So now what happens if I'm not passing this particular parameter section? So this is also we are going to discuss here in our tomorrow, like on Monday session. Okay, so if we don't have anything, we can stop the session up to here and we'll continue on Monday. If anyone having any questions, so please let me know. So before going to conclude our today's session.
So is there off on Monday? There is long weekend?
No, only tomorrow and after tomorrow we don't have.
Okay.
Okay. So thank you. We'll continue on Monday.
Thank you.